Hello everyone, my name is Jeff Rolka. Thank you for checking out my video. Questions from comments 42, some might say long overdue. We have loads of questions. We're going to talk about performance anxiety. We're going to talk about the lip trill. We've got some registration event or head voice, chest voice things that are coming up really quickly. So without dilly-dallying, I will say thank you very much if you have chosen to subscribe. If you haven't yet, I hope that you'll choose to do so now. Do ring that bell and give the video a like if you find that the information contained herein is useful. And first question is actually kind of two questions. I have trouble doing lip trills. Is there an alternative? Sure, there's an alternative. You can roll your tongue. Though generally speaking, for those that can't do the lip trill, rolling the tongue is just as problematic, and this is because it's how you're using air that is causing the problem. If this weren't free, I wouldn't be as shameless about this, but my website, jeffrolka.com, has a free method you can gain access to by signing up for the newsletter, jeffrolka.com. It's the AAA method, and I go extensively into how to establish the lip trill if you haven't been able to do it in the past or if you've struggled with it. And I would recommend checking that out. That would be my first and foremost suggestion. But the lip trill, if you can't do it, it's not the end-all be-all of vocal exercises, but it is really helpful, and it's especially helpful for gauging airflow and also really, really helpful for registration event practice. So maybe check out the AAA method. It's free, as I said, otherwise I wouldn't, be so shameless about plugging it. This first question also has the question, without thinking, I naturally mix head and chest. Is that a good thing, or should I be using chest mostly? Really depends entirely on the repertoire that you're singing and also your voice and how it works. It's really hard for me to generalize or give you any kind of advice around that because it's not a generic kind of thing that you're asking. If you're singing in an area of your voice where from the structure of your voice it would be more advantageous to use your chest voice, well, then maybe you ought to consider working on the tune so that you can use your chest voice there. On the other hand, if you are singing repertoire that is going back and forth across your secondo passaggio and you are making a seamless transition, well, there's nothing wrong with that. That's in fact really, really great. So in that case, that would be perfectly wonderful. Without knowing the specifics of your situation, I can't really say. What I would, however, suggest to you is that if you're doing it unintentionally, then you might be allowing yourself to have an unintended limitation on your voice. In other words, if you're not consciously knowing what you're doing, then you may just be doing whatever comes naturally, and that's all well and good as long as your voice is serving you well. But if there's other things that you want to pursue, things that you want your voice to do, then maybe learning to have a bit more choice in how you're using your voice would be advantageous. I would like to know if the voce, piena in testa technique has a negative effect on the ligaments. I mean, if you sing this technique all your life, will the vocal cords get tired by the age of 60 and above? And will high notes be lost? Because they say that if you sing in a high chest voice, then the voice sits down with age. Thank you very much for what you do. Sorry for my English, it's not my native language. Well, first of all, thank you for writing in English. It helps me to help you. And please don't apologize. At least as far as I am concerned, that is absolutely not necessary. And I am grateful that you've taken the time to learn the language so that I can help you as best as I can. Voce, piena in testa is said to be the sound of chest voice in head. It is predicated on making a seamless transition across the secondo passaggio, or across the break if you prefer that parlance. Though I never want to suggest there's anything broken with our voices, so I go with the textbook name, which is secondo passaggio. And I'm speaking here primarily of tenors and baritones, though this would also apply to mezzo-sopranos, contraltos as well. By the age of 60, some amount of muscle atrophy is going to begin to take place. So it's not voce, piena, and testa that's going to start to degrade your voice at that point and beyond. It's going to be the atrophying of muscles. Now, that will be different for all of us. Some will have more of it than others. And furthermore, the more that you practice your technique and develop voce, piena, and testa as you are still building muscle actively and things like that, and it's not atrophying as quickly as it can do beyond the age of 60, then the more that you will have to go into those later years of your life with. In other words, it should delay the atrophy of your voice and the loss of those high notes if you have practiced those techniques for years or decades preceding 60 and beyond. All that being said, Corelli used to say that after the age of 50, you should basically be content to be a sort of elder statesperson of the vocal community and not worry too much about how your voice is operating, that the actual performance capabilities beyond that point, beyond 50, are diminishing so rapidly that just be happy with what you've had thus far. You should be happy to have had a career preceding the age of 50. I think that was a different time. I think with healthcare and what we know about maintaining the human condition, human body, we might be able to stretch that out a little bit longer. But as far as I know, there is nothing about voce, piena, and testa that will have a negative effect on the ligaments. That doesn't mean that it doesn't exist. I haven't read all of the literature out there by any stretch of the imagination, but if anything, the reverse should be true. The more that you practice those techniques and develop that technique, then the longer you should be able to sustain your upper register singing as you move into your, elder years there. Question is, why can't I get vibrato at all, like evenly, naturally? That's almost certainly related to the balance of vocal fold engagement and the subglottic air pressure or airflow. If you are too reliant on vocal fold engagement, which your question would suggest that you are, because it's not coming naturally, so you're using too much muscle control at the larynx around the vocal folds, and so they cannot oscillate the way that they will when there is a balance, when the air pressure and the vocal fold engagement are said to be in parity. In other words, they're working together, and when they do that, they kind of push back and forth in this gentle capacity. They create this oscillation that we hear as vibrato. So I would highly recommend that you investigate your apagio breath management, maybe work with some short vowel sound exercises like that require you to keep your engagement firm and use short vowel syllables. That's going to help you to find the most efficient use of your voice. And then from there, keeping all of those elements the same, move on to more sustained passages and see if your vibrato doesn't start to emerge out of it. Can you explain why diaphragmatic breathing is essential? That kind of relates actually back to what I was just talking about. First and foremost, we breathe using the diaphragm. So if you're walking and talking, then you are using your diaphragm to breathe. Those are the structures that make it all go. As it pertains to singing, however, we are asking the diaphragm to behave in certain ways. And we do this by expanding our rib cage and then using the core body muscles to influence the behavior of the diaphragm. We do this to control the subglottic air pressure, the pressure below the vocal folds, below the epiglottis. This gives us control over the length of exhalation, ergo the length of phrase. It also helps us to control how much vocal fold engagement we are using. So if we're singing a high passage where we want to depend more on the flow of air and subglottic air pressure, then we can provide that. We have to do that with the diaphragm, and that means that we won't rely so much on vocal fold tension to create those pitches. It's a part of the puzzle, but it's always involved with our breathing. It's just that we're using other structures to influence its behavior because of the demands of singing. It's not the same thing, contrary to what you can sometimes read online. Singing is not the same thing as speaking. We are using our bodies and our voices subtly differently. Subtly, perhaps, but still significantly, shall we say. Can you advise me on something? The teacher told me that I have too much air in the closure and sound. Because of this, the voice quickly gets tired. Can you tell me some exercises, how to learn how to extract sound without excess air? Thank you. Now, this is all about balance, similar to the exercise I demonstrated a few moments ago. And this is just an arpeggio. He, 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 he. Now I'm using H and an E sound, which in the IPA is the letter I, he. If that's still too much, because the H will prevent a glottal attack, but it might be too separated for you to phonate the E sound effectively. So you might start with we, we, and make sure that you're keeping your expanded, and your core body muscles firm, both when you are singing and in the pauses in between those short staccato pitches. We, 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 we. As you get better at that, you can challenge yourself with the he. He, 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 he. He, 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 he. We're always looking for the same quality on the vowel. It should sound the same. And I would do all of these exercises in the most comfortable area of your voice. Nice and comfy chest voice range. You can find many, many of these exercises in the playlist on my channel that is labeled Beginners. In truth, it should be labeled Fundamental Technique or Foundational Practices or something like that. But probably no one would find it that way if I did that. So I called it Beginners. But the thing is that we never really outgrow these exercises. They can always be useful. If you're having a problem with vocal fold adduction or vocal fold closure, as it is often referred to, then those short staccato, those staccato vocalizations can help you to find the most balanced mode of phonation, mode of singing for your voice, and that will not have air in it. Now, if you still hear air, you might have to try to engage a little bit more so that you get more vocal fold closure. Having done that, then you can start to experiment with longer phrases. The next question is really more of a comment, but I thought it was really important considering the way the past couple years have been. Just rediscovered your channel recently since before the pandemic while I've been fighting a really bad depression. Before the pandemic, when I was still in school, I would use your warm-ups every day and it became such a vital part of my vocal routine. Actually, my old school friends and I would take turns in the music room using your warm-ups at lunch. First of all, that's awesome. I had no idea that my videos could ever be used in that way when I started making them, and that is absolutely amazing. Thank you for sharing that visualization with me because it takes me right back to when I was in high school, practicing during lunch instead of hanging out and doing other things. And I'm absolutely thrilled that the videos served you in that way. May it continue to be thus for those of you still in school. When the pandemic hit and quarantine began, a lot of things were put on hold, including graduation and planning for college university, which I always knew I wanted a program for vocal performance or acting theater in some way or another. For a long time, I lost motivation for any of my passions, but especially singing. After a while, it was difficult to remember why it is I wanted to keep singing in the first place. I've been slowly working my way back to my voice, And I just really wanted to say thank you for these videos, as they are now reminding me every day that no matter how bad the depression, it cannot take my voice away anymore. I am now getting ready for college and sending out applications. It took me an extra year to graduate, but I did. And although there's still a long way to go, I'm proud to say that I feel more and more like myself every time I use my voice the way I used to. So thank you again for being such a great resource and motivation for me. You are absolutely welcome. I could hardly be more thrilled that the videos that I've created here have served you in this capacity. And thank you for sharing these thoughts and this experience with me, and because I'm, talking about this here with us here on the channel. I am sure you are not the only person who has felt this way, and I want to encourage all the people who could feel that way to find the resources that help you. In this individual's case, it was the videos on YouTube. And again, I am really happy that worked out. That may be, similar for you, but it might be something else. The key here is to notice if it's not working and then move on. Try the next thing. You may have to go through a variety of different things that you try before you find what's really serving you best. But it's out there. Keep looking, keep searching, keep going. If it takes you an extra year, it doesn't matter. In the grand scheme of things, 1 year so early in your life won't amount to all that much as you move on into your 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, etc. Keep going. Keep doing what you're doing. I am glad that a resource that I have created has helped so much. It's really, really wonderful. Thank you for sharing that with me. How do I support my singing without being shaky and cracky with anxiety? So this is kind of an engagement issue, support, subglottic air pressure, but also kind of a performance anxiety thing. It touches on something, however, that I often think about when I am singing and I'm feeling performance anxiety. And it goes back to a quote that Miles Davis gave, which was that his power came through his feet. That really didn't make any sense to me. I didn't get it for a very, very long time. And so I don't know if it's sort of a chicken and egg thing, because I don't know if it's that I've been ruminating on that for decades and trying to practice it, or if there's something more to it. But I find that when I am performing, I root down through my heels and press into the floor. This gives me a firmer foundation from which to expand. And when I expand and settle down into that space that I am creating for my appoggio practice, I find that I tend to calm down. And that might be because in doing that practice, I am providing good subglottic air pressure to my voice, and so it tends not to shake or crack, because I'm actually addressing the fundamental element that's going to help it remain consistent. And then as I hear that, I then start to feel more confident, and then I get more comfortable. And depending on the night, maybe it only takes a song or two, maybe it takes 3 or 4, but I start to feel more and more comfortable in what I am doing. I don't know if that's exactly what you were asking in your question, but I do hope that helps. Hey Jeff, I'm a musical theater actress and singer-songwriter, and your videos are extremely helpful. Do you have any tips for developing vibrato? If I planned better ahead, I would have put this with the other vibrato question. Vibrato, even in the pedagogical textbooks, we are said not to teach vibrato. we teach apagio breath management and we teach vowel alignment. So apagio breath management is the breathing practice, the breathing for singing practice, sometimes referred to as support, that is taught in classical music but is just as applicable for those of us in theater or in popular musics. It changed everything for me, and it is, in my opinion, critically important. If you're not familiar with apagio breath management, I would highly recommend you investigate it. Vowel alignment is consistency of vowels. When we put these two things together, we will then have a balanced system of phonation, a balanced system of singing. And when they work together, they tend to kind of push back and forth on each other. And they sort of oscillate. And you can see where this is going, right? That oscillation is our vibrato. Once we start to feel it, we can encourage it along to get the kind of oscillations that we deem most desirable. There are a few guide points around that. I just released a video. I am recording this on the day that my vibrato video is being released. So I'll put a link on screen if I remember, but you can check that out, and hopefully that will help. It is a natural occurrence out of a well-aligned system. So when you have good apagio and good vowel alignment, you can have good balance of your singing voice, and your vibrato will emerge out of that. Thank you for your video. Regarding tightness, are there any tips for someone, me, LOL, that has tightness that seems to increase the longer I sing? The tightness in my throat seems to increase as I get further along in the song. When I begin a song, I seem to have much more of a relaxed, open situation, and then by the end of the song, I feel like I'm struggling to be relaxed in my throat. Same thing goes for my first song. Seems much more relaxed than, say, my fourth or fifth song. Thank you so much for any insights. You rock. Thank you. I appreciate that. This is very common. It is something that all of us, myself included, experience, I should think, from time to time. I certainly experience it from time to time. It is an indication that we are not maintaining our engagement sufficient to the requirements of the song. For example, here is a very real-world example. Let's say I had a bag of groceries, and you and I were here in the studio together, and I said, "Stick your arm out," and you stuck your arm out. And I then placed said bag of groceries in your arm and said, all you have to do is stand there and keep your arm up. You can't like put anything underneath it, you just have to sit there and hold the groceries. After a while, the grocery bag would feel heavier and heavier and heavier and heavier until finally we get to point of failure. And you would drop the bag of groceries. Nothing's changing. It's just time. And our voices, as we work our way through a song, have a similar kind of muscular response. We have those high notes that are there at the beginning, and the first time through, yeah, it's fine. It goes very, very easily. But the second time through, we don't maybe apply quite as much engagement, or we think we are, but we're not, because we're still remembering what it felt like a moment ago, and now it's feeling harder. But we've failed to consider that we're 2.5 or 3 minutes into the song now. That can have a very dramatic impact on how well we continue to phonate the high sections of the songs. Furthermore, and I'm kind of focusing primarily on upper register singing because this is normally where it manifests mostly, is in upper register response, is that let's say we have a song and the phrases kind of continue to go up and down and up and down and up and down, and they go down into a reasonably comfortable area of our voice. But as we continue to go back to that comfortable area of our voice, we're getting a little louder and a little louder and a little louder. This is having the effect of increasing our vocal fold tension a little bit more and a little bit more and a little bit more as we continue to go through the song. And that will then compromise first our upper register response, and ultimately, our voices entirely when we've generated too much vocal fold engagement in this one area and we're just pounding it away down there. Both of those scenarios are very common when it comes to complaints like this, where you started off and it feels pretty good. That leads me to believe that your technique in general is working really well for you. My advice might be in part to do some longer scale patterns. Like in my long scales video and stuff, I have these patterns. There's a couple of them. One of them, that's one of the patterns, I believe. You want to make sure that your response remains the same throughout. So if you were singing it, for example, and it sounded like, and I'm exaggerating, of course, but you get my point, right? The second trill on top isn't coming out as good as the first trill did, then you need to evaluate how you're singing it. One of the things that you can do to check yourself is ask yourself, am I being sufficiently light on the bottom? In other words, when I return to the tonic trill, am I reducing volume and lightening up sufficiently to facilitate the upper register response? There are other patterns in there as well. All of them deal with that practice in one form or another. For example, up, down, up, down, up, and then back down. And in each case, we have to return to that tonic, backing away a little bit so that we're not too heavy on the bottom, thus compromising our ability to phonate on the top. Great question. Really great question. Thanks for asking. I hope that helps. I have a question related to when you work with a client. On a video, you pretty much move seamlessly from one vowel to another in a set with occasional pauses when you move into the upper register. Thus passes some 15-20 minutes or so. What about doing more than one video, or repeating a video either for warm-up or for specific problem areas when you use the warm-up as a development exercise? Do you pause when switching videos or strategies, and if so, how much? Time to think or discuss the purpose of the exercise, or just a brief rest? Imagine it's different in a lesson as opposed to individual practice between lessons. You're absolutely right. And the truth of the matter is that any of the strategies that you have mentioned are possible. You have to evaluate how your voice is operating in order to decide what works best for you. The one thing that you do mention, however, is taking time to reflect. That, I think, is always a good time to reflect upon the why of singing a given exercise. Why am I doing this particular vocalization? How does it relate to my repertoire? How did my voice perform that last set? And what, if anything, might I change to have more of the response from my voice that I am interested in hearing? In a lesson, I don't always move quite so seamlessly as I do in the videos here on YouTube. The videos on YouTube are meant to cover the sort of widest range of vocalists, and I sort of come from the assumption that they're not going to have many issues in what I am delivering. In other words, I'm relying on you to choose what is the most appropriate video for you, your level of technical facility, and your voice. You know, if you're a baritone vocalist doing a soprano video, well, that's kind of outside the purview of the creation of that video. It's created for a soprano vocalist. I'm not saying that as a baritone vocalist you shouldn't try it out or experiment with some things and see, what you might learn from that. But you might require more pauses. You might have to change the exercises, change to a lip trill instead of doing any of the vowels for a little while until you gain more facility. There's any number of adjustments that you might want to make before being able to do the video as it was produced. In a lesson, I'm listening very, very closely to the individual's voice. I'm listening for any inconsistencies, any hesitations, anything that doesn't relate to another. And then I'm going to move to an exercise or to a way of doing the same exercise that we're doing, like maybe change the vowels or start it in a different place or something to that effect. I'm going to change things to test out my hypotheses, to find the most advantageous exercises for that vocalist to do so that they can get the most consistent performance from their voice and then apply that to their repertoire. If you are experimenting with the videos on the channel, then you might find that you want to take a pause here and there. I would encourage you to rewind or back up, however you want to think about it these days. Back up and try a section again if it didn't go quite the way you think it ought to. If you hear that when you sing, there's this huge disconnect between A and Ah that wasn't there with E and A, you might ask yourself why that's happening and maybe explore some other exercises that can help you align the Ah vowel with your A vowel so that you then have more overall vowel alignment. This generates a more overall consistent performance from your voice. The videos on YouTube, they are the same techniques, the same practices, scales, and patterns that I use with my clients. The only difference is that I cannot adapt them to the specifics of your voice in real time. But if you listen really carefully, you can learn to do that. And for that matter, all you really have to do is listen carefully and identify what it is that's not consistent with your vocal performance in that exercise, and then find the video of mine that teaches you how to ameliorate that inconsistency. Because at this point, I've covered just about every angle that I can think of. And if I've missed it, leave a comment and I will either send you the link or I will make the video. That has been true since I started doing this nearly 10 years ago. It'll be 10 years in November. Big, big anniversary coming up for YouTube and I. But that, lots has changed around here. That has not. If you can't find it, leave a comment and I will either send the link or I will make the video. Also, a little reminder here. I got a comment recently about a mid-roll ad. I sent out a variety of notifications a year or two ago now. YouTube changed its policy and turned them all on globally. I do not want your practices interrupted in this way. If you find one of my warm-up videos that has mid-roll ads, leave a comment on that video and I will go and turn them off. All right? That is inconsistent with the experience that I want you to have practicing with your voice if you're using my videos. One of the things I wanted to work on is consonant urgency, not loudness or belting. An example might be something like musical theater, Oklahoma or Grease, or the intro to the show Green Acres, which, by the way, I think is an amazing theme song. Thank you for reminding me of that. Or even The Killers, where Brandon Flowers says, "You had a boyfriend that looked like a girlfriend that I had in February of last year. It's not confidential, I've got potential." Adding to my skill set, tonal onset confidence in these types of more urgent situations. where, again, not talking dynamics or belting, you go from quiet to urgent very quickly. Could you direct me to a video on your channel that might help? I don't think I can exactly, because I don't think I've really discussed that all that much. I mostly focus on vowels and getting vowel alignment and connection between the vowels. I've done a few videos that talk a little bit about consonants, but it's usually done in the terms of getting the consonants out of the way of the vowels. What I would suggest to you is this. One of the absolute best parts about Apagio breath management is that it is dynamic. It responds to what you ask of it instantaneously because you are maintaining your expansion and engagement. In other words, instead of having to summon up the energy to then have a lot of very articulate consonants in your phrase, it's already there. You just have to then articulate the consonants. And that is one thing that I really haven't done a lot of. And so what I'm going to have to do is think about some consonant exercises and do a video or two on those. I know you didn't start this off as a suggestion, but thank you just the same. I will give it some thought and cut that video just as soon as I possibly can. Until then, you might carefully consider how you're practicing Apagio. And if you're unfamiliar with that term, I would at least start with checking out my video on Apagio breath management. It's older, but just as good. And also, if you like, it's either questions from comments 6 or community question 6. I'll put a link on the screen. I'll probably remember. And if I forget, leave a comment and I'll put the link up after the fact. But at any rate, in that number 6 video, I go through all the process of establishing Apagio and how to practice it, how your body works when you use it. So that's where I would begin. Hi, Jeff. Great stuff as always. Have you got any tips for someone struggling with singing fast scales? When I sing them, I end up sliding from one note to the next, sounding undefined and messy. 2 words. Keep going. What you are learning in that process is fluidity and vocal fold balance. As you do those practices, listening and thinking about the pitches very carefully, in your mind trying to hear the next pitch that you're going to sing, then the pitches will become more well defined. If you try to do any of the other things that we can sometimes do to try to articulate the pitches more definitive, like break up the airflow or push on each of the individual pitches, what you will end up doing is messing up that fluidity and messing up the balance of your voice. So it's better to be messy at first and keep practicing, keep listening ahead in the phrase, so that when you achieve the definition, you achieve it with balance and fluidity. That is a long-term project. But if you have a daily vocal practice, it will come in a reasonable amount of time. It might take longer than you might be hoping for, but to be a musician is to have a bit of a long view when it comes to these practices. The short-term push on the notes or break up the airflow or things like that won't serve you long-term. Keep going. You might have an ear training practice. You might also slow them down ever so slightly, but make sure that if you do that, you then do them again at the faster tempo, because we don't want to develop a habit of having heavy phonation on these pitches that we will then have to relearn yet again. In other words, we just want to learn this one time if we can help it. So if it's feeling a bit too fluid, if it's feeling a bit sloppy, just keep going. better that it be a little bit hazy around the edges, but still balanced. The balance is the important thing. And I believe that was our last question. Thank you all so very much for watching. I hope this has helped. If you've got questions, the comments section below, because oftentimes answering questions just creates more questions, which is pretty cool if you ask me. I really do appreciate you being here. Thank you for watching. Thank you if you've chosen to subscribe. I might remind you that Patreon is available if you would like to get this as an MP3 or my other warm-up videos as MP3s to take with you wherever your travels should take you. My name is Jeff Rolka. Thank you one last time for watching. Take really good care of your voices, enjoy singing, and hopefully we'll see you again. Bye.